it needs to be said that I'm not a guitarist. I have a guitar, I'm not a guitarist. I just am kind of trying to teach myself, have been for a few years now, but I almost never practice. Most unfortunate, kind of like Lizzie Bennett and the piano. I know I would be better if I took the time to work at it more, but I don't. So, but this week we are having VBS, and the theme is like a Western theme. And so I just feel like the songs needed a guitar, and we're gonna have a fiddle and a piano. I was hoping for like a honky-tonk sound, but even though both of our pianos are digital, they don't have like a honky-tonk sound. So, you know, it'll just be a regular piano. Anyway, that's our VBS. The person who would normally play the guitar, who actually knows how to play it, is out of town, at least the first 2 days. So I am trying to learn the song. I'm really close, like 75%. But VBS starts tonight, so I have a lot of practicing to do. But this morning, I decided to read. I've had a very stressful weekend, and so I normally, like, I get up and I'm productive and I do things and then I read as time allows, but I decided to do the reverse today. I got up and I read. And I read until I was done reading for the moment. So I got a lot accomplished, but let me put this away and get my books, and I will tell you a little bit about what I was reading today. So first of all, a holdover from June. I started this on June 30th, and I am halfway through, and that is The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Post by Austen July. Like I said last week when I was talking about this book, oh my goodness, this book really matches like me and my living room and everything. Got a color theme going on. I feel like we're going to move pretty quickly through just, you know, hitting major episodes in Marjorie Post's life, and that is turning out to be the case. And it is interesting. We move pretty quickly through different episodes of her life, which was a very interesting one. Now, I'm finding that I don't particularly admire Marjorie Post too much. I can sympathize sometimes with the things that happen to her and difficulties that she experiences. And I think that it's a credit to her what she was able to accomplish in her life, and her work ethic and her get up and go kind of attitude. I can appreciate that. But generally speaking, some of her trouble in her life she brought on herself. And it's always a little bit harder to have compassion on someone when that happens. Even though, I mean, it happens to all of us, right? So we all find ourselves in the same boat on occasion. But anyway, she's not something that I particularly admire in general, as I'm discovering. Definitely not someone that I would aspire to be like. I definitely would never run in her circles, which were the elite circles in New York. I'm talking Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, those guys at the height of what is that era called in New York City, the golden era or whatever. Yeah, I would never be in those circles and would not be comfortable at all in those circles. But it is interesting to read about her life. I'm enjoying it overall. One little tiny quibble I have is that it talks about her reading The Great Gatsby. At one point, there's a scene where she's reading The Great Gatsby, which is very appropriate because that's very reflective of the life that she lived in. And she talks about how Jay Gatsby reminds her of her husband at the time. And that it was a very appropriate book to reference, etc. And it was an interesting little Easter egg, if you will, I guess, if you want to call it that. But the quibble is, The Great Gatsby was published in 1925. And I only know that because it's 2025 now. And, you know, literary circles are making a big deal about it being the 100th anniversary. And so otherwise I wouldn't really pay attention to that. And the scene where she was reading it was 1922. I mean, okay, so we know The Great Gatsby was published in the 20s, but Austen July couldn't be bothered to do a quick Google search to find out when it was published, because it literally took me 2 seconds to confirm what I thought, that it was 1925 and not 1922. So anyway, tiny quibble. Doesn't affect overall the story. I'm still finding it interesting. And I didn't realize it was divided into parts. So I'm halfway through the book and halfway through the second part. So the last two parts are a lot shorter, but I sort of have a mental goal of finishing the second part today and hoping to wrap up the other two parts early this week, but I don't know. Like I said, VBS kind of rules your life that week. And Emma, I'm reading 2 chapters a day with a group read for the Jane Austen July. I'm very, very much enjoying it. I love Emma. This is my third, at least, time reading it. And Emma and Mr. Knightley, I just love their interaction. I love their arguments and their banter and their comfortableness with each other. I really love that. And I'm really loving this time around all of the coziness in this story, the family life that's depicted. It's really so beautiful. And Mr. Knightley is really just an extension of the family life, which is why I guess to me, it doesn't feel weird about him being so much older than Emma. I wish that he wasn't, because I don't really like, big age gap romance things, but I don't think it's ick in the sense of like he was grooming her or whatever, because it's just their families were close. They were, and when his brother married her sister, he became an extension of the family. He became a part of the family circle, and they just were very close in that way. And to me, that seems like a fairly natural progression of events in every situation. In case, would that end up with those two characters falling in love with each other? No. But in this case, it doesn't bother me. So, but I know that for some people, that's definitely a drawback. One thing I've observed is in the conversations of people reading this book in the group read, one thing I'm seeing a trend is a lot of people are saying they did not appreciate this book when they were younger. And now that they are older, they're enjoying it a lot more. And that when they were younger, they really didn't like Mr. Knightley because he came across as, kind of an old fuddy-duddy. But now that they're older, they actually see his wisdom. And I just think that that's perfectly appropriate because, right, he's older than Emma. If you read it when you're Emma's age, you might be like, Mr. Knightley. But then as you get older and you gain your own maturity and wisdom, you begin to see the wisdom that he has. So I thought that was interesting. For me, I've always loved Emma. I don't know what this says about me. I've always loved her as a person, and I've always loved Mr. Knightley as a person. I've always loved them as a couple. I really like Emma. I've never had any issues with this. I just enjoy it when I read it. And incidentally, some friends of mine and I are going to be watching the BBC Emma in another couple of weeks. We're at least going to start it. I don't know when we'll be able to watch the whole thing, but we're going to start it next Friday. And I am really looking forward to that. That's going to be fun. Okay, so now Jane Austen's bookshelf I am also reading, and that is by Rebecca Romney. I am reading it with Cheryl, and we are really enjoying it and being introduced to these women, these lesser known female authors. What I'm finding most fascinating about this book is their personal stories. Of course, we know everyone has a story, but each of these women, their story is so unique and so interesting. Like, their life stories would make fantastic novels. And in fact, Hannah More, I believe Karen Swallow Prior did write a fictional biography about her, and I do want to read it. Although she doesn't seem like really the sort of person that I would necessarily gravitate to, but I am curious to read that biography of her. But Charlotte Lennox, Charlotte Smith, they had such interesting lives and interesting stories. I find it very fascinating. And then Rebecca Romney tells us their story, tells us how she came across them via their connection, their association with Jane Austen. Either Jane Austen read them or mentioned them in her letters or mentioned them in a book, etc. And so she tracks them down, and she tracks down different editions of the books that they published or the books about them. And so she talks a little bit about the different editions and what makes them unique and the particular ones that she wants and how she goes about finding them. So there's a lot of aspect of rare book collecting in here as well, which is a subject I'm not super familiar with. So that has been really interesting. And also Cheryl is a little bit more up on rare book collecting than I am. And so I've learned a lot from her about that as well. So it's just been really a very interesting book to read, very interesting conversations that we have had. I don't agree with all of Rebecca Romney's perspective on either the authors or their works or life in general, but it is still very interesting, very informative, very engrossing, and I'm enjoying it very much. We're slowing down the pace a little bit this week because BBS. That's going to be a big theme here, okay? But it's still very good. The other thing that I am reading is What Kitty Did Next, and I'm reading that on Kindle, and that is going a lot more slowly because, first of all, I have time commitments with this one. Like, I have deadlines for completing the chapters by a certain time, and also with Emma, I need to read 2 chapters a day. So those are the priority. Plus, I just want to finish this because it's a June book, technically. So my priority has been these 3. So I'm just getting to What Kitty Did Next if I have extra time. And I'm only on like page 55 or something out of 360 some. So not very far in that one. Overall, enjoying it. Kitty is now in London with Jane and for the season and enjoying their social world there, such as it is. And so, I mean, it's fine. It's good. I don't think it's going to be like, well, I don't know. It's too early to tell yet how my final feelings will be. We'll see. The jury is still out on that one. So that is all that I have for so far, but it's only Monday. I'm sure there will be more, and I will film updates as they happen and let you know what I've got going on. Okay, it is Tuesday afternoon, and I am in the middle of reading this. I did finish part 2 yesterday, and I'm working on part 3 today. I'm hoping to finish part 3 today and then part 4 tomorrow, because I'm anxious to be done with this book. But I want to finish it, in part because I want to see how the rest of her life goes, and in part because she hasn't yet gotten to the place where she builds the house that is the estate near DC that I have been to. She's built multiple other houses, including Mar-a-Lago, which I did not know, but she has not yet built her house in DC, the estate there that I have been to, and I want to get to that part. But right now she's majorly frustrating me because she's endured 2 terrible marriages, but I don't know what she expected when she went into them in the first place, because the first guy, she was a teenager. Her father was against her getting married, but she insisted on doing it. And her father made valid points that she was too young. She hadn't known the guy in question very long, and she was too immature to understand the things that were at play that ended up becoming huge frustrations in her marriage, namely that she and her father were kind of outsiders in the social set at Greenwich, Connecticut, where they settled, which I was at earlier this year. That's where, perpetually the wealthy people have been. And there was like a long established social set there of people who had been in the United States, like these old families. It was a class thing, right? She was not old enough to understand those things, but her father could see it. But she refused to listen to him, and she married the first guy anyway, and it ended up being terrible. So they divorced. And then the second guy she married from the beginning, it was all about, it was a physical relationship from the beginning. And the guy he just was wanting to have a good time in life. And I mean, at that point in time, it was the roaring 20s, and she was fabulously rich. They had tons of money. So they lived the high life, and not just in the sense of being able to afford anything that they wanted, which they did, but raucous parties, like the Great Gatsby kind of stuff, like raucous parties. There was a scene that describes a party that she had at her house, and I was like, what? Like, it's so outside of my own life experience. I had difficulty comprehending it. Not only the expense, more than I probably spend in a year in my life, on top of which the depravity with which the guests behaved, like that kind of stuff. It was just like, it's so outside my realm of understanding. But that was kind of like the life that her husband wanted. And she adapted to that. Like, she hadn't been like that. She had been a homebody. Her first marriage, her first husband had always wanted to go out with his friends, but he was out with his, golf buddies doing that kind of stuff, not going to parties in the same sense of what she was attending. And he definitely didn't take her with him. And the second one, though, like, they went together to all these parties. So she kind of adapted to that lifestyle. And there were times when she just got really weary of it, but that was like what he lived for. And then he was a philanderer. So they ended up getting divorced. But again, like, here's the thing that I think is stupid. If a guy is willing and anxious to be intimate with you on day one, what makes you think it's going to be any different when you're married and he meets some other hot thing? I don't know. I guess women think that in their, like, they think they're special enough or something. But no, if a guy can't control himself with you from the beginning, how is he going to control himself with anybody else? Like, there has to be some evidence of self-control in this area of their life. Otherwise, to me, it's a red flag. And the same thing is happening with this third marriage. So yes, she's on her third marriage now. And so this guy, she's introduced to my friend, but at the time they meet, he is married. And he and his wife have been separated for a long time. Like, she lives in London and he lives in DC. So they don't have much of a marriage, but they're still married. And so they meet and they're like immediately interested in and attracted to each other. And so the guy immediately begins pursuing her despite the fact that he's married. And he acknowledges to her that his grown daughters are very much against this relationship. He goes to London for the express purpose of initiating divorce proceedings with his wife. So they come to an agreement. The divorce is begun. He comes back to her and they get together before the divorce is even finalized, even though she had told him at the outset that when your marriage is well and done, then we can get together. She never like returned any of his calls or responded to him or whatever during the interim period when they were, before he had initiated the divorce proceedings. But he would send her like flowers every day and he would send her notes every day. And she kept all of them. And she, like, according to Austen July as biographer, she enjoyed all of this attention. She like lapped it up, even though she didn't outwardly respond to it. Anyway, it's just, and then you think that your marriage is somehow going to be sacred to him and that he's not going to do the same thing with somebody else, but she's all convinced, like, we're at the point of her wedding day and all of their children disapprove. And I don't know, there's just red flags everywhere. And it's like, girl, like, But I feel like people very often don't see the red flags, even when someone on the outside can see it like glaring. People in it either can't see or ignore or just go along perpetually hoping for the best. I don't know. Just red flags everywhere. So she's majorly frustrating me with her life choices right now, but they're about to embark on, like, I can tell by the timeline, we're about to get into World War II. And her new husband is an ambassador. And so I'm sure that's going to be coming into play here. And so from a historical perspective, it's about to get interesting. And from a historical perspective, that's another reason why I've been enjoying reading it, despite her actually frustrating me, is the things that she's lived through. She, was born towards the turn of the 20th century, and she lived through the rising industrial boom in the United States. And then she lived through the first war, like her first husband fought in the first war. So she was old enough for it to have affected her. She lived through the roaring 20s and experienced that to the full. She lived through the Great Depression and experienced that. And now they're about to experience World War II. There's so much history that she lived through in her life. So that also has been a fascinating element of the story as well. So that keeps me reading. So I'm curious to learn about, World War II and how it affects her life, but also I'm kind of watching this third marriage in the sense that you're watching a train wreck, because I know that she gets married a fourth time. So I'm just like wondering when the other shoe is going to drop here. And then also I'm assuming it's with this guy that she builds her house in DC, because he's an ambassador and he's a politician based in DC. So I'm assuming that's when that house gets built. So I want to read about that. And then once I've gotten through that part, I'm just going to finish through to the end because I've gotten this far anyway. But hopefully by tomorrow, so I can be done with this book and move on to someone's life that is much more, well, it's not that her life isn't interesting. It's just frustrates me. Yeah. Anyways, so that's The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Post.
It's a Wednesday morning, and can I just say this week is kind of crawling by. My husband last night kept thinking that yesterday was Wednesday. And I was like, nope, it's only Tuesday. But today is Wednesday. We're making it halfway through the week. That's good. And I took some time this morning to finish reading The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Post by Austen July. And my word, this woman was an interesting woman for sure. And I just want to say that there are definitely some excellent qualities about her. she was a very, like, a strong woman, but in a good way in many ways. Like, she knew, at least as described by Allison Pataki, and many people, like her staff, seemed to love her. And, you know, when you think about like Pride and Prejudice and Mr. Darcy stuff, how much they loved him and how that turned Elizabeth's thoughts about him to his favor and improved her opinion of him. I think there's something to be said for someone whose staff loves them. So her staff and the people who ran her companies were very faithful and loyal to her throughout their lives. So that definitely speaks to some strength of character there. And she was a very generous and philanthropic woman. She spent so much money on herself. I mean, she had a yacht that was not just, you know, for sailing around the bay. Like, she made transatlantic trips in her boat, and she did that with regularity. Like, she would sail to the Caribbean and sail to Europe and whatever with her family, and, you know, just pleasure trips. She bought not only diamonds that were and jewels that were costly in and of themselves, but costly because of their history. Like, she had a diamond that Napoleon had given to his wife. She had diamonds from Catherine the Great and Tsarina Alexandra. She had diamonds and jewels with history to them, and also artifacts and stuff, which I knew some of that because I had seen those artifacts at her house in Washington, D.C. But she also was very generous with people, and she lived through several traumatic times in her life, like the Great War and the Great Depression and World War II, and she definitely invested her money in giving to people who needed it during those times, and building hospitals, donating to schools, donating to individuals, etc., all that kind of stuff. So there were definitely some very positive qualities to her. I do think that men found it difficult to be married to her. I think that was part of the problem why her marriages disintegrated. In part also was, I think, she ignored the red flags, like I said, or she wasn't discerning enough to see them. And I think that was a huge part of it as well. Like, she had trouble seeing the red flags in these men's characters. So they weren't the best of men anyway. But I think they struggled with being married to her because it was her money. It was millions of money. And even though they were wealthy men in their own right, like, hers dwarfed theirs. And even though with her first two husbands, at least, and maybe her third one, no, I think it was the first two, they technically were her voice in the company, the Post cereal company, and later General Foods. But she was really the one who made the decisions, called the shots, and grew her company, as was right, because it was her father's and it was given to her. It was, you know, she was the heiress. So that makes sense. I just think it was difficult for men to be married to her, and all of them, at least as portrayed by Allison Pataki, of course, because this is, I mean, it's well researched, it's based on fact and what is known to be true, but it is a novel all the same. She does have each of the men, of the first three men that she's married to, towards the end of the marriage, as it's beginning to disintegrate, one of their complaints is not only does she run her life as she sees fit and her companies, etc., all of that, like, she managed them as well. So I can see that, but they also did terrible things as well. Well, at least, yeah, they just weren't great guys to begin with. And then her fourth husband, oh my goodness. Her fourth husband that she married when she was older, like in her 60s, and she should have known better. He turned out to be gay and a and somehow she didn't know that before she married him, and she didn't find out until someone anonymously sent her photos of her husband engaged in various activities, all along those lines. And she was shocked, and her daughter was like, you didn't know? And she was like, no, I didn't know. And her daughter was like, okay, well, everyone else know. Not very discerning when it came to the men in her life, for sure. But she obviously also had some good qualities. So that was quite an adventure. Glad I read it. Content-wise, it's pretty clean overall. Like, there's not any scenes of intimacy, like, you know, it's mentioned periodically with her various husbands as she falls in love with them, but there's nothing that bothered me personally. And then as far as cussing goes, there was an occasional cuss word sprinkled throughout, but again, it wasn't anything that kept me from reading it, but you will want to know that before reading it. So content warnings there. 3 or 4 stars because it was well written. It brought to life an interesting woman that I was curious about, and I wanted to keep reading. It wasn't difficult to read at all. I have limited respect for Marjorie Post and her family. I can acknowledge the good that they did and the good that was inherent in them, but there also was a lot of very terrible mistakes in their personal life. All of them. So, I mean, but that doesn't, make it a bad book per se. It's just, I'm not sure how many people, want to read about that. So, that is The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Post. And so now I am ready to draw a card and read a new book. Although I brought my cards with me, but I did not bring my journal that will tell me what each card stands for. So I need to go get that. Have my journal with the chart, have my cards. So let's pull out the cards. Okay, somehow these cards at some point got waterlogged or something. I don't know. So let's shuffle them. All right, and I will just randomly choose without looking. A 7. All right, so 7 for 1 point. Oh, I need to do a poll. This is a poll one. Oh. So, a poll by title, and that gives me 1 point. A poll by author, that gives me 3 points. And a poll by emoji in the Discord group, that gives me 5 points. So, I think I'm going to do that, but first I need to figure out, I'm going to do the emoji one because those are fun. And I haven't done one yet. But I think that I need to figure out what 3 books to put on there. So let me look at my TBR for July. Okay, so I haven't started A Gossip Story by Jane West yet, which is what I want to read for my reading challenge. So I need to start that. For reading my shelf and reading about royalty, The Other Princess or The History of England by Austen. And then for Jane Reed's Christian Fiction Challenge, Not a Sparrow Falls by Linda Nichols. I'm reading Emma, and I'm reading Jane Austen's bookshelf, and a retelling. I have Charlotte on my shelf that I want to read. Oh, there's a big, I thought it was Carpenter Bee season was over, but I don't know. I'm currently working on Austen retelling right now. I'm reading What Kitty Did Next, so I won't put that on this one. I'll do A Gossip Story by Jane West, Not a Sparrow Falls by Linda Nichols, and The Other Princess. I forget the name of that author. Something Bryce, I think. Yeah. I'll put those 3 on my poll, and we'll see which one wins. Okay, so results of the poll, although I had to do a second one because there was a tie. And the tiebreaker was Not a Sparrow Falls by Linda Nichols. And I read this years ago, probably not long after it first came out, which was in 2002. And I remember really enjoying it. And I also really loved that it was set in an area I'm familiar with, which is Virginia. And a lot of the story happens in Alexandria, Virginia, but it mentions multiple places that I'm familiar with. I remember that. I remember also being really struck by the fact that the author, Linda Nichols, was not afraid to tackle a storyline involving drug addicts. And I guess the main character in this story isn't an addict herself, but she was sucked into that lifestyle. And she had grown up in a Christian family to one extent or another, but then had left that. And so now she's trying to find her way back. And so that's the story. There's more to it than that, but that's the main character. I would love more, I guess some people call it gritty fiction. I guess that's just as good a word as any, but
anything like that, where people struggling with addiction or really heavy things. And it's really beautiful seeing the work of God in drawing her to himself. And yeah, I've already read 70 pages of it. I'm about to start chapter 6. So I've read 5 chapters. And it's a really, really gripping story. And I've already had points where my heart was racing, points where I had tears in my eyes, and I'm already really invested in these characters and looking forward to seeing how everything works out for them. I know that the end of the story is going to be more or less a happy ending, maybe not like the ultimately happy ending, but a good happy ending. So I am really enjoying this so far, really enjoying the writing, and it is every bit as good as I remember Linda Nichols' books being. So I have a feeling it's not going to take me long to read this one. So I was cleaning out my closet downstairs and I discovered this little gem, long forgotten and hidden in my belongings down there. It's a little travel candle. Wish I could convey the smell to you. It has kind of a Christmassy smell, cloves and orange. And I think I will put it right here on my Dickens shelf. Perfect. Today I was in the mood to do a little bit of thrifting. I've mostly been at home all week, just doing projects at home and relaxing and reading, but I've had the itch to get out and go see what treasures I could find. So I got these 2 magazine organizers. My son has these notebooks that he keeps. He creates these sports tournaments, and then he has these notebooks full of notes. And they are stacked very haphazardly on his bookshelf. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go get you something to organize those. So those were 99 cents. And then I got this cute little sign to go on my bookshelf. 99 cents. Oh, and I found this. This wasn't as great of a deal. A little dash waffle maker for me to make my protein waffles. Look at the cute little flower. It was $5, which was a lot, but I saw it a week or 2 ago, and then I regretted not getting it. And when I saw it again today, I was like, you know what? I keep thinking about it. It might be $5, but whatever. Then I got these shoes I've been needing, just plain basic black flip-flops, $3. And then I got a couple books. I don't know if I'll keep this one. It was in really good condition. Tuesdays with Maury. And then this one, I will keep until I read it at least. I've been wanting to try Elizabeth Googe, but haven't yet. And this is The Scent of Water, 50 cents each. So that was my thrifting fun today. It is Friday afternoon, almost Friday evening, and it is time to wrap up this weekly reading vlog. I did get a decent amount of reading done. I had more time to read than I thought that I would, but other than the book that I finished earlier this week that I cannot recall at the moment what it was, I haven't finished anything else. I am more than halfway through Not a Sparrow Falls and really enjoying it and reading it every spare moment that I have, but I may or may not be able to finish it between tonight and tomorrow. I have a pretty busy day tomorrow, a lot of stuff going on, so we'll see. We'll see. I haven't gotten very far on What Kitty Did Next. That book has been a little bit slow moving, so
Anyway, that is all that I have for you right now. This is the end. This is all there is. There is no more. So I'll see you next time.